I found a volume slider and I just turned.
All right, here we go.
Get tickets of the day. This isn't working.
I wonder why.
Go figure.
All right, we're back recording here.
Sweet.
Which means we, yes. Focus back.
So again, looking at the application server pro, this is the administrator, excuse me, this is, the admin login. And this is, I mean, I know Jeff mentioned, I think you're kind of going to be in both, just depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If you need to mess with bells, you're going to be here. If you need to mess with hardware and volume, you're probably going to be in the 102B tool. But just to go over the rest of your options here, system settings, or excuse me, system options would be backup restore if you need to reboot. If you ever notice that time goes off, we do have them synced with an NTP server. So you could always test the connection here. Essentially update your time and submit if you ever notice that bells are off. Outside of that, this is where I created your staff user. So if you click on that, you can change the password, assign a role, and you can even give them a startup tab, which that's what I picked, the calendar. Now, once we create the user, we need to assign their privileges with a role. And this is where I went ahead and just selected schedule, calendar, graphics. Full will give them edit rights. Limited would be view only. Disabled, they just don't have access to it. Group codes you won't mess with, but that's essentially what, it's not even going to be an option for you. So that's where you would create a user and roles. You're going to have access to the calendar, the graphics. We have all the graphics built out, but if for whatever reason you ever need to edit, we do have an edit button here. And then we can right click one of these drill buttons, edit if needed. I don't see you needing to do this, but that's going to be an option for you. So we'll close that. So outside of that, at this time, I didn't give the staff access to the audio files. But if you ever need to manipulate, add, you're going to do it from this page. So you'll see that I added all the drill audio files, the I love you guy audio files, and then everything else is just kind of a generic random tone here. So that's audio. Go ahead.
So one of the reasons that we didn't give access to those files, and we'd be cautious about it. So we had at Grandview, we had an issue where bells were not ringing on the outside. So for whatever reason, and we found out that didn't we find that out, right? There's a corrupt audio file or something that was causing the issue?
There was, yeah.
So as we manipulate that, just be aware. So if we do bring in any of those audio files because we want a different bell, that's fine. It's not a problem. Just be aware. I would really say that if we do apply something like that, let's really make sure that we're tuned in and listening, just to make sure nothing broke. Make sure everything is okay and working as it should.
Yep. And just to show you the rest of the screens, creating the drills, I had to create message files. So I can show you, this is essentially what it'll take to create the display that you see on the clocks when you go into a drill. So really generic. I'll show you here on this next page. But I mean, this is where you create messages if we needed to. But we, for the most part, I think we went through all the schools and put everything in place. So once you had an audio file, this is where you'd create a new event. Which also the staff account has access to. So right now at Tozer, we have a bell all. We have this audio file selected, and then we have it applied to the all call group code. If I go to exterior, we'll see the bell exterior event. We'll see the audio file that it plays, and that's tied to just exterior speakers. That's events. And then again with the schedule, this is where you tie in the event with the times you want the bells to ring at. Outside of that, the only other thing I see you guys potentially looking at or messing with, this is where we put everything together under the playlist editor. So for a drill to happen, we had to essentially bind or connect the audio file for evacuate, the text file for evacuate, and those are combined here in a parallel playlist. Evacuate audio and evacuate text. Down here, you'll see activation code. This is what I had to put in place for the Cisco to be able to launch each of these drills. So if you were to use this dial code from a Cisco phone, you would essentially launch the drill. And I mean, I think that's pretty much it for this.
So as we get into it again, you know, we weren't going to go crazy with all the programming that we can do, but Valcom gives us quite a bit that we can do. So if you think about an assembly schedule, if we said, hey, we want to create actual text that says assembly, you know, go to the gym, you know, and have that scroll across, we actually have the ability to do it. You know, I don't want to open up that can of worms because I think that all of a sudden, you know, we're going to spend our days doing nothing but the reality of it is, as you're coming through, you know, with your schools, that there is a real applicable reason for us to do that. You know, we were talking about one of the things we're looking at on phase 2, and this, you know, for you guys too, is the idea of putting a clock or a weather-resistant speaker on the outside, because when we had the event last Tuesday over in Severance, there were still parents that were walking up and wanting to get access, and they were not aware that we were on lockout. And so we were saying, hey, it might be a good idea that we put a speaker or a clock out there that we can communicate with families or anybody walking up. So if we do that, we may come up with a specific program that we send to a specific speaker in a specific, you know, situation. So there could be, you know, actual case uses for it. I just don't know what it looks like today. So as we get into it, recognize we've reined this thing back in. But in your schools, if there's a desire and a real need for us to do it, we can. It just depends on how much work we want to put in to get that taken care of, you know. Go ahead.
So I'm working on putting a spreadsheet together as well for you guys that will hold all the logins, passwords, everything you'll need to essentially manipulate the system and run it.
Will that have the breakdown too? We get all the spreadsheets for the breakdowns of what's what as far as IP addresses, the speakers, what rooms they're in, all that jazz.
I have that load sheet. I know Jeff has access to it, and yeah, we can share it with others if needed.
Sweet, yeah.
I'll take that. So I haven't given that out yet. We've got that load sheet because we do have schools where, you know, again, that Severance Middle is an example. I flipped Hawk House and Courtside. I didn't flip them. I knew where they were at. But when they were numbering their speakers, they did it in a different way, and I assigned Hawk House to Courtside and vice versa. So we want to make sure as we go through, you know, that every number that we have is correct.
Right.
Once we're sure that that dial code is applicable to that classroom, yeah, absolutely, BJ. There's not a reason for us to have it. We'll load that up. I'll throw it up on the tech share or whatever. So you guys will have access to it as needed.
Cool.
Yeah, to that point, I do have a spreadsheet that includes every single network device per school, dial code associated to it, IP address, subnet, etc.
Awesome.
So yeah, if we don't have any more questions, I'll move on to the 102B tool. But yeah, that's bell schedules right here. Log out.
Yeah, and we'll talk again, I think, as your schools come up, if there's people that want more access, if you want us to add or trim stuff up, you know, on that main login page. You know, let us know. Otherwise, you guys have the access, and I'm content with that. I don't think we need to turn it up for the staff account, just because there's more stuff they can break.
So now to show you guys the 102B tool, that's essentially the interface you have with the hardware in your devices. So the login will start off with, it's going to be 102B, and I already have a hardened password for this location. Let me make sure I copy it. And I'll walk you through what you'll see. So this is the server. You have one of these at each of your schools. So when I log into the 102B tool, as of right now, you're only going to see the devices that exist at Tozer. So opening it up, we already have a saved snapshot that includes all the devices that have been loading in. So instead of scanning the network and trying to add everything from scratch, you can go ahead down here and click open. Okay. As of right now, I've saved it to the public desktop. So you'll see this includes all the hardware that exists for Valcom here at Tozer. You'll notice that everything is highlighted blue. That means that we still need to do a verification to have access to these devices. So I'm going to click verify. I'm going to check all, and we'll verify.
A little bit better. That is it.
And just depending on the amount of devices, this will usually take a few minutes.
So you guys see the content that's in there already, you know, the name of that speaker, so typically associated with the room, MAC address that's there. So.
And I went ahead and for the names, as you can see, I went with Tozer private, I think public school. I did some kind of acronym along with the clock in case we ever decide to do multicast for the whole district. That way you don't have 10 different A101 classroom clocks. You'll be able to differentiate building and device. Almost there. You'll see everything's been verified. And I'm sorry, I meant to show you this. We do have a legend here at the bottom left, and this will kind of tell you the state of the clock or what you're looking at. So when you see that highlighted blue, that's what we had to do, that verification required initially, because there is passwords that we added per device. So it was just going through and verifying that. So now that we're in a normal state, we can see everything that exists at Tozer. So just to go over this screen, we have the application server pro. That's where we're doing our bell schedules. That ends in the .12. So if you ever need to change the IP address for it, you would do that right here under your network options. Outside of that, we've got one-way speakers set up. So these are going to be the double-sided in the hallways. So that means there's no talkback on those. The pages will go through, but you won't get that feedback from the hallways. We have the input-output unit. This is the hardware we'll use whenever we integrate with the fire or the access control. We have one of these devices at each of the buildings. You'll also see the interactive console. That's a tablet that we've set up at each of like the reception areas. Just to go through the tabs here, your only real thing I've messed with and that you're going to be exposed to is going to be your network tab if you ever need to manipulate that. We've got time. We've got the NTP server and Mountain Standard Time. And then you'll notice that we have a group membership. This is how we assign a device to each of the page groups. You'll notice there's nothing selected for the interactive console, because if I had this selected and you pressed an all call and you did it, the speaker from the interactive console would also page and there'd be interference. So for the sake of no interference, you don't need this attached to a group. There's SIP information as well, but for the Cisco integration, that's done at a different place. I'll show you. The head end, this is the .10. This is what we're actually logged into. And again, just network tab's going to be the main one you want to play with there. We also have page. These are going to be your analog zones. So I went through the schools and tried to identify what we have plugged into each of the channels. So I noted them here in the comments. And then you'll notice if you go to channels, this is how you can select each of the different analog zones that you have in place. So I went ahead and tried it, did my best in trying to label what was exterior and interior. You'll see the dial codes here as well. And this page, you can also manipulate the volumes, but I'll show you a place where I'll just show that to you now. The best place you want to, if you need to increase volumes, you're going to want to do it from right here, from programming and volume adjustments. It can be done here, but if I were to do this, the device is going to want to reboot and do a reset to apply the changes. If we do them from this page, it'll be an instant change. So if I click on page 1, I increase it to +5, I can commit the changes, and now that's been increased by 5 decibels. So again, this is where you want to be if you have any adjustments that need to be made. And you can actually just go through and look at all the devices and their settings too. So jumping back to the analog spot. This is where you actually assign it to what groups it applies to. So exterior speaker, as of right now, belongs to the exterior group call, all call, and district all call. So you've got 2 page units at Tozer. Now you've got some more one-way speakers, but as you can see, these are 550s. These are going to be the big displays that you have in the cafeteria, gym, and media center.
Hey, go back to that program real quick.
For the page?
Yeah, where it was on the different groups. So when we talk about creating different zones for your school, so we did this at Tozer when we created the kindergarten rooms and the first grade, et cetera. That's where we get that information so we can select based on the room or whatever. So if we had a different number here, that would be first grade classrooms. And then when we went and selected those particular speakers, we get assigned that outcome. So, if we do decide to get into that at each school a little deeper, I know with middle school again, they want exterior and 6th grade classrooms, exterior and 7th grade from different lunches, right? So that's where we were able to set that stuff up. Again, don't want to get crazy, I don't want to give everybody the ability to get stupid granular, but we can. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, and this shows you essentially one device and the group membership that applies to this device. You can also essentially categorize and sort by group. So if I want to see what is inside of the kinder group, you'll see what's checkmarked. And you can add and delete from this page as well. But yeah, going down the list, these are the 550s. These are going to be the big clocks. Same configuration options. But now you'll notice there's a tab also for flashers. If you're adding new devices, we want to make sure that the settings you can always copy settings right here. But we want to make sure it's set up for 95, and this is essentially checked. That's how we can enable the flashers for each respective group. I don't think you have to mess with it, but just showing you that it's there. Now you also notice that we have speakers under TalkBack is what this is. These are going to be all your classroom speakers. So if you called into the class, they can also talk to you and talk back through that speaker. And going down the list, the last device we have in place is going to be the SIP controller. This is where the Cisco integration took place. So main things you'll want to mess with is your network information here, time, make sure the NTP is in place. This is the dial codes. Right now we're only using this channel, but you have an option for a second. And then this is the configuration for the Cisco. So essentially had the IP addresses provided by Jeff, and we gave it a dial code, and now Cisco is integrated with this system.
Hold right there for me. So you'll notice the 8400, so on the emergency button, so again, that shows you. So you've got the two buttons in the classroom. The black button is going to go just to the interactive console. So we'll talk back to that. The red button goes to the main line at every school. Windsor High School being the exception, because it say go straight to voicemail, you know, and now that auto send an answer, we set up a different number for that emergency button to ring into. So this is what we're talking about. So with Cisco, again, we were actually talking yesterday, we can manipulate a lot of different things. You know, if you think about it, if we said, okay, on this auto destination, we want it to call 911. You actually would set it and program it as such. It would jump on Cisco would dial out, we would be able to do a 911 call from a classroom by pushing that button. We're not doing that today, but just, I mean, Cisco's got all the ability there. We just come in here and program from here, and we're good. So we can do what we want. Again, go back to the granularity of things. We can do a lot of different stuff based on where we're at.
Yeah, and just to show you everything else we have here, the save snapshot, this is going to save essentially this configuration that we have in place. We do have the scan button, so when we do add new devices to this network, we can hit the scan, and that'll let us know if there's anything new to bring in.
So the devices at your schools there's 520s, that's the talkback, that's the classroom speaker, 522s, which are the two-way, no talkbacks in the hallway, and the 550s, which are the bigger class speakers in gyms, cafeterias, and whatnot. So just so you know, those are the three that we're talking about. So if I'm asking for 522s, you know, that's what it is. But those are the only three that we've got.
Now, in terms of troubleshooting, if you have a classroom, if someone states that a classroom isn't having sound or there's just something off, big troubleshooting tool we have is going to be the network diagnostics. Click on that. It'll load up this is where you want to see your device. If we had an issue of B105 and we don't see it on this list, that means we're not communicating to it. So let me make that big. Green is good, loaded is good. We just want to bring that to your attention.
So we have the ability, again, you know, just to manipulate. So that was the naming convention that Convergent did for us. You know, was the TPS or whatever. If we want to change it to TZ, you guys wanted a different way to label your classroom. Again, you know, look at what's middle and you know.
Yeah, if you're wanting to change the name, because I noticed, I think I've seen TZ and TPS. If you want to make this TZ, you would just edit the device name right here under properties.
Not a big deal once you're learning, you know, once you know what you're looking at, it's not hard to figure out. But if we did want to change the name, if we've got a wrong name in there because courtside, you know, in Hawkhouse, if we want to change that, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. Where, you know, Westmod or AMOD or, you know, modular is probably our biggest thing. You know, where I think maybe having a name that makes a little sense to us district-wide is maybe something we'll manipulate. I don't think we need to go crazy, but we can. So, I just want it to be easy for you guys to troubleshoot. I know with AMX we weren't able to do a thing. You know, so if we were able to get in here and actually manipulate the sound levels or troubleshoot something, check network connectivity, reboot a speaker, you know, whatever. I want it to make sense for you guys and not spend a stupid amount of time trying to decipher things. Having the access is great, you know, since we haven't had it before, but making it easy is ideal.
So just to glance over, we do have a security tab. I went ahead and made sure I disabled all ports that weren't being used. So you'll notice we have 50 devices and communication is secure with secure protocols on. On that spreadsheet that I'm going to provide with login information, you'll see the device passwords that I have in place for each of the schools. If you ever need to add devices and harden them again, this is where you would do it. But if we're adding devices, most likely it's going to be on the integrator side. But just to show you that exists. Again, here in programming, the main thing you want to look at here is the volume adjustment. You can do it by a single clock, or if you want to do multiple, just change the radio button over, and it'll let you select multiple clocks. I think it's really easy to read, and as you can see, it'll tell you which ones have been changed in the past. The toes are hardly yeah, there hasn't been any changes, at least through this tool, since we started.
One of the tougher things for us to find is just because the analog zones were set up with AMX, so when you're manipulating analog zones, just be aware that because of the way they were configured, there's a possibility that adjusting the volume for one thing, like we were looking at a kitchen with the middle school, that's something we'll have to get taken care of, where that speaker is in different spots, and so you crank that speaker up, all of a sudden it's deafening to somebody else, and so we may have to get in some of those analog zones that aren't wired correctly, but we're kind of blind to it, so we won't know until we're adjusting something and figuring that out. So still a little bit of exploratory work to do, depending. Just be aware of that.
Now under the system tab, we can select how long the dial codes are. We went ahead and went with 4 across the board. If that ever needs to change, you can change it there. There's also a volume offsets. We found this in the beginning, and this applies to the audio groups. So I just went ahead and made everything +6, just so an all call would sound the same as an exterior, an interior, and etc. I think the last thing you're going to want to look at here is going to be audio groups. This is where you would create, delete, or add groups. So we went ahead and added the SRPs, all call, district, and then the drills exist here as well. Audio group membership, this is what we looked at earlier. There's also a button for it here, right under the tabs. Just another way to get to it. If you ever had IP conflict, duplicate IP, duplicate dial code, this would be highlighted, and you'd be able to see what conflicts need to be addressed. Right now, everything's looking good. And I think that's pretty much it, guys, for the 102B tool. Any questions? I do want to show another login after this, but essentially, when you log into the .10, you would open the 102B tool. You would open the snapshot, verify your devices, and now once everything's normal, we can make some changes.
One of the things that we haven't talked about, guys, is what does it look like troubleshooting wise? I mean, we don't actually have a hierarchy, set up of layer 1 versus layer 2 versus whatever support, so I think maybe that's something that we can kick around. Like what ticket should come to you? What do you guys want to do? You know your days better than me, and so this is easy to jump onto and manipulate as Abe just walk us through. But if we say, hey, we'll do volume control and adjust some things like that at the tech level, anything more than that, we're going to kick it up the chain. That's completely fine. I just want to basically throw all this stuff out so you guys see it today, and then we decide how we want to run it going forward. So, each school might have 100 different things they want to do with the VA. You guys might say, yeah, 5 of those things we're going to do. The other 95 need to go someplace else. So don't feel like this is like all of your stuff. Like this is just everything the tool has the ability to do. I had to talk to Steven, and I wanted you all to go through this training so we could really kind of dissect what is appropriate for a school tech and what we would consider maybe a tier 2 or 3 support, where you say, okay, Jeff, I can't get around to this. I'll take care of it, or I'll come on the phone and we'll solve that problem. So I don't know what that looks like. I'm just throwing it up there for discussion at some point, but we'll be able to decide how we want that to go. Just with your normal day time, I don't think you need to become a Valcom expert, is what I'm saying. That's a good time. Yeah, stumbling through some of these things, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So any questions on anything? Should we good with this? What did you want to show next, Dave? We're good with this one.
So the next thing I wanted to go over would be like a Tech 2 or Tech 3 thing. So right now we're logged in as the 102B user. So let me log out, and I'll show you one more interface with the admin login. So again, we're at the .10 admin. This is where I had to go to essentially get rid of all the default logins and to harden the system. We do have a convergent login in place still. I understand we're turning this over to Jeff, so if you want to delete it, go ahead. But this would give us access to essentially remote and support in the future. This also shows the 102B login. So if I click on this, this will just log us in as a 102B user, and it'll take us to the exact screen and the process that we just went through. But just to get you a little familiar and just get eyes on this, we have the 102B connection, we have the convergent connection, and these are the users in place. Our service, convergent, admin, and 102B tool. So if we ever needed to change the passwords, we would do it here. I don't recommend doing it. They're already hardened, and changing them might break the connections. But again, I just wanted to show you we have an admin login in place, and this is where you would make some, more network changes if needed. But you won't need to be in here if you're adjusting volumes and whatnot.
This would be something that we did. So Stephen talks about security of our system. So when we harden the system, it's not that we're booting convergent because we don't like them, but Stephen doesn't want any of those open connections into the system. So the reality of it would be, unless we signed a contract with convergent that they were going to support us, we would remove that. So this would be something that I would do. And then if we had a support issue or a ticket come up where we needed them to be able to remote in, we would go here, provide that access. They could then log back in and do what they need to do from there, remove the access when the case is over. So that's how Stephen would like to handle it. That the least amount of holes that we have into our system, the better. And so that's the purpose of it.
Will we each be having our own login, or are we just sharing?
Yeah, we haven't really talked it through yet, Nate. I'm not sure how we want to do it. The basic login for the users at all the schools, on that on the application server. I mean, that made sense to me. We want to. It's not all that, so I can't use our network credentials, but I don't know that I want to create, another password for you guys to have to remember. So, what do you guys think? You guys want to do something unique for school? You want to do a generic that way? Nate, you can manipulate your schools, but if you needed to jump in and help out Sawyer at Severance Middle, we'd have the same login. So theoretically, we could do it then. I don't have a problem with it. So again, just an item for discussion, but we'll create it in there to where that user exists, and you can get in and do what you need.
I guess it just depends on what the system can log. That would be my.
Sure.
Like if it's logging per user, maybe does it have logs per user to know that like a certain user changed something?
That's something I haven't dived into.
Okay.
I'd have to just circle back with Dan and just confirm.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if that's the case, because that would be valuable there, because then, when I go in and screw something up, I didn't do it under admin, and then everybody's logged in under the same thing, we'd be able to identify who did it.
Got it.
Sweet.
What else?
Anything else?
Anything else to show us, Abe, or is that it?
No, that's pretty much it. You've got these two interfaces you'll use: Application Server Pro for bells, and this for the devices, the .10.
Abe, I think we're good. We'll go ahead if you want to kill the recording.
Yep.
We'll circle back on this. If I've got questions, I'll let you know.